For more than a decade, Craig Melvin has walked into the bright studio lights of today with the steady composure viewers have come to trust, his voice carrying the weight of headlines that often feel heavier than the hour that contains them. And yet, behind the polished desk and practiced cadence lies a paradox he has quietly wrestled with as the years have accumulated. How does one maintain hope when the day's first words are so often about disaster, division, and loss? For Craig, now in a stage of life where he feels the subtle arithmetic of time, friends retiring, parents aging, children growing faster than expected, the question is no longer theoretical, but deeply personal, shaped by conversations at the kitchen table with his wife, Lindsay Sarniak, whose own career in broadcasting has taught her the emotional toll of living in perpetual breaking news mode. Together, they have come to understand that the morning show paradox is not about denying darkness, but about choosing, deliberately and repeatedly, to frame it within a larger narrative of endurance, community, and grace, a lesson that resonates profoundly with viewers in their early 60s who have witnessed cycles of upheaval before and know that despair can be as contagious as hope if left unchecked. Craig often reflects on how the earliest hours of the day carry symbolic power. People pour coffee, glance at their phones, and look to familiar faces on television, not merely for information, but for orientation, for reassurance that the world, though fractured, remains navigable. He feels that responsibility keenly, especially after segments covering hurricanes, political unrest, or stories of senseless violence, when the teleprompter moves on, but the human heart does not. And he has learned that resilience in this profession is less about emotional detachment and more about disciplined empathy, allowing himself to feel enough to remain authentic without being consumed by every tragedy he narrates. Lindsay, with her calm pragmatism, reminds him that their generation has weathered its share of national trauma and personal disappointment, that the audience tuning in at 60 or 65 carries memories of wars, recessions, cultural shifts, and private griefs that have quietly shaped their capacity for perspective. She encourages him to speak not only as an anchor, but as a fellow traveler on the long road of adulthood, someone who understands that hope is not naivete, but an act of defiance against cynicism. There have been mornings when Craig has driven to the studio in reflective silence, thinking about his children and the kind of world they will inherit, wondering whether his steady delivery makes any measurable difference in the vast churn of media noise. Yet he returns again and again to letters from viewers, retired teachers, grandparents, former nurses, who write to say that his measured tone and small moments of levity help them begin difficult days with steadier footing. Those messages remind him that hope is rarely grandiose, but often incremental, built in quiet exchanges between broadcaster and audience who may never meet, but are bound by shared ritual. The paradox deepens when ratings pressure and social media criticism threaten to reduce complex human stories to fleeting spectacle, and Craig has had to guard against the subtle hardening that can occur when outrage becomes currency. He speaks openly, especially in private moments with Lindsay, about the temptation to retreat into irony or emotional armor, yet he resists, believing that the older viewers who have remained loyal to morning television are not looking for sarcasm, but for steadiness, not for performative anger, but for thoughtful inquiry that respects their intelligence and lived experience. In recent years, as colleagues have come and gone and the media landscape has shifted at dizzying speed, Craig has felt an increasing desire to slow the cadence of certain conversations on air, to linger a little longer on stories of neighbors rebuilding after catastrophe or communities bridging divides, understanding that for viewers in their seventh decade of life, such stories echo their own lifelong efforts to mend, to forgive, to rebuild after setbacks that never made headlines but mattered just as deeply. Lindsay's perspective has been instrumental. She often points out that sports, which she has covered extensively, offer a powerful metaphor for the morning show paradox. Seasons of loss are followed by unexpected comebacks, veterans mentor rookies, and the crowd returns year after year because hope renews itself with each opening whistle. And Craig has embraced that analogy, recognizing that journalism, too, can choose to highlight perseverance alongside pain. He does not pretend that optimism erases suffering. Instead, he views hope as a form of stewardship, a way of tending to the collective spirit of an audience that has earned its wisdom through decades of triumph and trial. And when he looks into the camera at the close of a particularly heavy segment, he imagines speaking directly to those who have buried parents, navigated layoffs, faced health scares, and still wake up determined to find meaning in ordinary days. In quieter evenings at home, when the studio lights are replaced by lamplight and conversation drifts from headlines to family memories, Craig and Lindsay talk about legacy, not in terms of awards or ratings, but in the subtler imprint of tone and temperament, the possibility that their children and viewers alike will remember that in an era of constant crisis, they chose steadiness over sensationalism and compassion over contempt. It is in those moments that the paradox feels less like a burden and more like a calling, a reminder that while the news cycle may be relentless, the human capacity for renewal remains equally persistent. And so, each morning, as the familiar theme music rises and the cameras begin their silent glide, Craig carries with him the quiet conviction that hope is not a denial of reality, but a disciplined response to it, a way of tending to the collective spirit of an audience that has earned its wisdom through decades of triumph and trial.